Aloha and welcome to the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center's An Afternoon with the Author. My name is Deidre Teagarden. I'm the Executive Director here at the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, where our mission is to inspire people to find the hero within themselves through the legacy of our Nisei veterans. You can find out more about our center on the web at nvmc.org. We are so thrilled to have all of you with us today as we join this mother-daughter duo of Carolyn Morinishi and Marian Kubota to kick off our 2021 series, An Afternoon with the Author. This is where we invite authors from across the state and the nation to come on and talk a little bit more about the backstory to the books that they have written. Before I introduce our authors, just a few housekeeping items for those of you who are new to the series. We wanted to let you know that we'd love to get questions. So there is a little question and answer box at the bottom left of your screen. So please feel free to type in your questions as you think of them, and we will get to as many as we can throughout the discussion. This is also being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel, the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center YouTube channel, in about a week. So we encourage you to go on and share it with your friends and colleagues, and maybe take a look at some of the other talks we have up there. We also wanted to let you know that we have 10 copies of the book that we're talking about today, Japanese Culture for Kids, here at the center. So if you're interested in getting a copy, please feel free to reach out to us. Now, a little bit about the book and about our two authors. Published by Hawaii Hochi Limited, Japanese Culture for Kids, Book 2, Favorite Children's Stories, is a compilation of 12 Japanese children's stories that have been passed down from Japanese immigrant workers to their children. After each story, there are related crafts, puzzles, and activities for the children to try. The book was authored by Hawaii-born Marian Kubota and her daughter, Carolyn Morinishi. Their families lived and worked on sugar plantations both in Hilo and Kapa'a, Kauai, but maintained strong ties to their Japanese heritage. Between the two of them, Marian and Carolyn have 3 teaching degrees in Nihon Buyo, which is Japanese classical dance, Chanoyu, which is tea ceremony, and Ikebana, flower arranging. So the text of this book draws on their many years of experience in the cultural arts. Additionally, Marian's husband and Carolyn's father, Yoshio Kubota, was a Nisei World War II veteran, having first volunteered for the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and then after completing basic training, was transferred to the Military Intelligence Service. Ladies, we give you a big virtual welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Well, I want to start off, you are our first mother-daughter author duo. You are the first children's book that we have talked about, and you're also the first book that has been produced during COVID. So I just kind of want to start off and ask you, how difficult or easy was it to produce this book during COVID?
Well, actually, we had our first meeting about this book on February 28th, 2020. We had traveled to Oahu and we met with the Hawaii Hochi staff. And Carlene Chinen, who's my editor, asked about writing another book. And we thought that the children's stories would be a good thing. So we communicated everything via email, because after that, in March, COVID started getting crazy. And so we sent pictures, we sent illustrations, the editing text back and forth via email. And I didn't visit the office until I think it was November to pick up a draft copy to approve the draft. And the other way that COVID affected us is that the publisher wanted to print a little bit less copies than my first book because they're afraid that bookstore sales would be down. So, but other than that, it's using modern technology. It has been pretty easy and pretty smooth.
Wow. Well, that's good to know. So I have to ask, we already have a question in here about your book one. So tell us a little bit about your first book. This is book two. And where can people get book one? I know somebody who tried to get it and they haven't been successful.
Okay, good. Well, that's a good question. So this is book one. I just have it here. It was made in 2014, 2015. And at that time, Carlene, the editor of the Hawaii Hochi, asked if we could make a book that collected all of our favorite columns. And we decided that having it based on Japanese festivals would be nice. And so there's 4 chapters with 4 seasons, and each chapter covers a couple of Japanese festivals and text facts about that festival. And as always, what follows is either games, crafts, or activities for the kids to try to help them learn vocabulary and facts about that festival.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot. And they just reprinted it. In fact, it just became available. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and the Hawaii Hochi office has them available now. They just did. I think this is the 3rd printing. So they are available now. Again, it's in Honolulu though. So um, you could go to www.thehawaiihochi.com and find their phone number and call them about picking up a book.
Perfect. And congratulations. That's wonderful. So before we get to the book, because we have lots of questions about the book, I wanted to talk about both of your backstories. So Carolyn, I know in the few conversations that we have had, the Japanese culture, the traditions, and the values are so important to you. They are instilled in you. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Was that from your parents? How did that get so ingrained in you? And then Marian, we're going to talk about your backstory as well.
Yeah, so my parents, having Japanese culture and values was always really important to them. And as you had talked about, my dad served in the war, and he when he came back, studying those topics, those arts were really important. As a young child, his family grew up on a plantation in Hilo called Amaulu, and they didn't have any money to send their kids to Japanese cultural lessons. So he made sure that we learned that when we were young. And also, he was very good about singing us Japanese songs before we went to sleep. And he also read us Japanese stories. And I happened to borrow this book. It was one of the books, you can tell it's got tape on it and stuff. One of the books that he read to us with old Japanese stories from Japan. So he was a big influence. And of course, so was my mom.
Mrs. Kubota, what
You
about
can
you?
call me.
Okay, all right. Now that you said it's okay, I will do it. um, we talked a little bit last week about your family. You are Nisei. Your parents were from Yamaguchi Prefecture in Japan. But talk to us a little bit about growing up and you know the values that your parents instilled in you, and we'd love to hear that.
Okay, I was born and raised on Kauai, Kapa, and my parents were not very wealthy, so I couldn't take any Japanese dancing or piano. So when I had the family, I made sure that my 3 girls took dancing, and also learning Japanese was something I really was ready to go to Japanese school. But just at the time I was supposed to enroll, the war started. So our church and Sunday school, I mean, Japanese school was closed, and it was turned into an army barracks. So therefore, I learned no Japanese there. So what little Japanese I know, I taught myself and spoke to my parents. So when I had a family, I made sure that I enrolled them in Japanese school here because I couldn't teach them anything. And so I really thought that they should know their culture because they're Japanese, and we just need to know all the culture. And at first, they didn't like Japanese cooking when I was cooking. But now that they're older, they appreciate Japanese cooking. And that's about it.
And then, of course, you met your husband, and he volunteered for the 442nd, and those years must also have been very difficult, you know, for him. And did he talk a lot about that to the family, or was he very quiet about those stories?
Oh,
I like to share about Burma.
Yeah,
Please do.
I can show the. Oh, do you want to talk, Mom?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Show the pictures.
All right, I wanted to share a couple of pictures of. Oh, hold on a second. Oh, sorry. I wanted to share a couple of pictures of my dad and his brother. So can you see that? Yes. Okay, so that so my dad and his brother are the two in the back row. They both volunteered for the 442nd. My dad happened to be working on Oahu at the time, and his brother was in Hilo, and they both wrote letters to each other saying, you know, I'm going to volunteer, so make sure you stay home. And their letters crossed in transit, and they both ended up volunteering. They didn't want to leave their parents without any sons, but they both volunteered. Their two sisters, their two younger sisters, are on the ends there, and the parents are seated in the front. And my dad, he's the shorter guy. He, as Deirdre said, he volunteered for the 442nd, completed basic training with L Company, and then after that was transferred to MIS. He had actually answered his questionnaire honestly, saying that he had gone to 12 years of Japanese school, even though he wasn't that great of a student. A lot of the other Nisei boys wanted to be very American, and so they would put no, that they didn't know any Japanese. So that's how my dad, who was only a mediocre Japanese school student, went into the MIS and helped the United States Army translate documents and interrogate prisoners. I have another picture here. This is, besides my dad and his brother, my dad is the lower right, Yoshio Kubota, and my uncle, his brother, is in the middle top, Sadaichi Kubota. There are three others uncles that served in the 100th, 442nd, and MIS, and Atsushi Saito in the 442nd, Richard Toshio Omori, who is in MIS, and Mitchell Itsuki Oshita, who is in the 100th. So my family does have a long history and a lot of connections with the Nisei veterans.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You know, we're so thankful when families do share, and it's very special. So we appreciate that. So now between the two of you, you have so many degrees. You are so involved with the community, whether it's as being an assistant principal, a school teacher, working with Boys and Girls Club and Boy Scouts and all of those different groups. What is it that you try to instill through your community service or through your working with students as it relates to these stories that you tell through your book and the values that they you know, that they're sharing?
Okay, I'll answer that if it's okay, Mom.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we talked about my Japanese dancing, and so I just wanted to, oh, wait, sorry. First, I was going to share this picture. This is part of our inspiration to share the culture. This is my mom and her 13 grandchildren. And all of them have taken dance at one time or another. And we try, my mom always tries to instill in them the traditional Japanese values. Deirdre also talked about the fact that I'm a Japanese dance instructor. This is a performance from actually kind of a long time ago. I think it was in the 1990s. But my sensei is on the left, Sumako Azuma II, and she just passed away this past July. So we miss her very much, and she is a big influence on me. She also, besides my dad and my mom, she also taught a lot of those traditional Japanese values, you know, kansha, enryo, all those kind of values. And she really helped make me who I am today. And then we were talking about this, how we try to serve the community and teach others. This is my Japanese dance group in 2018. This is it was a big recital, and my sensei is sitting next to me. And these kids are part of my my inspiration and my joy. And as much as I can while I'm teaching them dancing, I teach them about those traditional values and also about Japanese cultural things like how to bow, you know, getting otoshidama in New Year's, or giving ore when somebody does you a favor. And I also have to say too that some of these cute little dancers are also the models that are in book 2. So I always thank them very much for that. I have another group, and this is on Kauai, and this group has mostly adults, but has some kids. And again, for me anyways, as a Japanese dance teacher, I always try to teach the culture along with the dancing, because I think the Japanese traditional values are so important. So, okay, I think that's all the pictures of dancing.
Marian, coming from a place where you weren't allowed to speak Japanese, you had to stop learning, to making sure that your children learn about dance and culture and the language. You must be so joyful and so proud of your daughters, that they have really taken that and done amazing, magnificent things with what you ensured that they learned.
I really am. That they took it on themselves to learn the tea ceremony. And they got their degrees in tea ceremony too. All 3 daughters. So I'm very proud of them. And those 3 got the Naturis first, and Carolyn pursued Shihan. And so I'm very, very proud of them.
And for those on the call who might not be familiar, to get your Natori or to earn your Shihan, that is one of the highest levels and the highest honor. I don't know if you could just give us a little background on that for those who might be unfamiliar.
Okay.
Carolyn, do you want to talk about that?
Okay. Yeah. So getting your Natori degree in Japanese dance usually means that you have taken for 10 to 15 years and you've mastered the basic techniques. You have to go to Japan to take a test in front of the board of directors, and it's very nerve-wracking. To get your Shihan exam, you usually study for maybe 10 more years, and you have another test. It's also a dancing test, but where the Natori exam test is like 8 minutes, the Shihan exam is combined, I think, 25 minutes of dancing, and it's very physically straining. But also we had to take a paper test. In Japan they call it pepa testo, and I had to memorize like 130 different facts about Japanese dance, and the book was written all in Japanese kanji. So I sat there with my dictionary, figuring out all the kanji. And then when the actual test came, they pulled 20 questions from that multiple choice and fill in the blanks and true and false. And I got 100% because I really crammed really well. I'm not a native speaker, and I also didn't learn kanji growing up, but you know, with a lot of study, I was able to pass. So, and now it's given me the biggest joy of my life, which is teaching others. So you know, I'm so grateful for that experience. It was nerve-wracking, but I'm very grateful.
Congratulations. Well, I'd like to kind of pivot to the book now. And I know that you say that this is a children's book, but I have to say that it's so good for adults too, and it's such a great learning guide with the Japanese language that you have at the back, and the different customs, and how to, you know, like you said, give somebody an envelope. But let's start from the beginning. So originally you were writing a column for the Hawaii Herald, the Hawaii Hochi, since 2006. So that's where this started, correct?
Yes, yes. In actually, I was writing a column for a different paper, and my cousin Alan Kubota, he saw my column and he thought, "Wow, this would be perfect for Hawaii Hochi." So he took it to the editor Carlene, and she liked it and started running it in her paper, and um, and that's when I took my mom on as a co-author, because I knew I could rely on her experience as an educator, and her Japanese language, which even though she says it's not very much, it's more than mine, and a lot of customs and things about the old ways. And so I write this monthly column for the Hawaii Hochi, and I've been doing it since 2006, so 15 years now.
And we
Sorry,
know your
Hawaii
mother
Herald. I said that wrong. Hawaii Herald.
um, interchanged. And we know your mother is just being humble when she says she can't speak Japanese that well. I love how it seems to be broken into chapters within the book, and you have stories about, you know, Yuki, about bravery, and in there you have, you know, Momotaro and Kintaro, and then you have the chapter of kind hearts, where you know, if you do good deeds, they will be rewarded. And then of course you have the shape shifting, which is always interesting. But all of them have, of course, morals, and the morals seem to be, you know, don't be greedy, rewarding good. Uh, how did you pick these specific stories for the book? Because there are so many stories out there. What was it about these stories that caught your attention, and why did you categorize them that way?
Um, well, I know that these stories were my favorites growing up, and um, I think I just showed the list to my mom, and she said, "Looks good," and yes, and when I realized that they all had they all had some similarities to them. They all have morals, of course, but like the shape shifting, there happened to be three that fit into that category. And so I asked my friend, who's actually a professor of Japanese language. She came up with the title of each chapter. I told her which stories and what I thought those stories portrayed, and she came up with the chapter titles. Um, yeah, but they are all great stories.
So one thing I thought was very interesting, and I'd love for you both to weigh in on this. You know, in each story, there's a moral. Usually somebody did something that maybe wasn't quite right, and then they had to apologize. But what's also very interesting, and I think this is definitely in Japanese fairy tales, maybe more so than Western fairy tales, the importance of accepting the apology. I mean, that is also a big part of every story. Am I, you know, what do you think about that? Do you feel that that's something that comes from the Japanese culture of the equal importance of being able to accept an apology?
Go ahead, Mom.
I think so. We were brought up to be humble and to accept apologies if they're given. And that's the way we grew up. So I think it has a big meaning.
I agree. I think the humility is such a big part of the Japanese culture and the Japanese values, and humbly accepting an apology like that helps to keep the peace, also helps to smooth things over. So I think that's like you said, an important part of a lot of these stories.
You know, and of course the rewarding the good deeds. And these are also, you know, they're not really lovely Disney-esque fairy tales. I mean, there are some hard lessons that are learned in some of these stories. So it's, yeah, not for the faint of heart. It's like the old time stories, like the ones my grandmother used to read me, the non-Disney ones. But what I love is that you have the Japanese language written right in, you know, right in the story. So as you're reading, you suddenly get the, you know, the word stone, which is a Japanese sleeping mat. This is the Isun Boshi story, which is sort of like Thumbelina, but different. But then you have word games afterwards where you learn Japanese vocabulary, and you can make a boat, and other activities. Did you have as much fun putting these together as the kids do?
I think so. I know that I love trying to figure out a way to recycle items. And I actually, just because I knew I might talk about this, here's a Japanese water scoop made out of a cylindrical container and a stick. And this one is probably one of my favorite ones. Mokugyo, which is something that you see at Buddhist temples, and it looks sort of like a fish, but it's a bell. And sometimes the priests will hit it, or sometimes it's decorative near the front. This is made out of a Quaker oatmeal container, and as you can tell from the bottom. And then this is a thing to hit the bell with. So yeah, so I enjoy trying to find crafts that are out of recycled items. And my mom is actually very famous for that. She, we didn't mention this before, but she spent 14 years as a teacher and 14 years as an administrator. And she, one of her specialties was hosting these workshops where people would learn multicultural crafts, whether it be African or Latin America or Asian. And she would make these 3D displays where she would say step one, and she'd glue step one onto the board, step two. And if anyone reads my this book or the the Hawaii Herald articles, you will see that I do the same way. Step one, make a picture. Step two, make a picture. And so my mom had these craft displays around her house as I was growing up. And she always tried to use recycled items. And one of her more recent ones that we put in the Hawaii Herald column was using the Ferrero Rocher candy wrapper as a osensu. You know, super cute. My mom has great ideas for recycled craft items.
You have to do a whole book just about that, especially after the holidays. I'm sure everyone got those Ferrero Rocher. Those things are so good. So getting back to the book, talk about the illustrations. This is like a whole family. This is a family affair because it was your sister who helped.
Yes. So so my sister, her name's Kim. She is also a Japanese dance natori, and she's also a tea ceremony, has a tea ceremony degree just like me. But the added thing is she can draw really well, and I cannot. What was really nice, and I'm going to share another picture here, is what was really nice about my sister is that I didn't have to tell her which way does a kimono go. It goes left over right. Or in this case, this is Kintaro. He's receiving a sword. And I didn't have to tell her to make it in a heian costume. You know, she knew exactly how to do that. This is from her tea ceremony experience. Since we both took tea ceremony, she knew exactly how to draw the implements. this is the when the okama, the tea kettle, turns into a badger, or actually it's actually tanuki. So so again, I didn't have to ask her, ask her to make sure to draw the tea ceremony implement this way. She just knew how to do that. She also draws extremely cute animals, which I love. This is Momotaro when they're sailing on the ship to go defeat the monsters. And then I have one more picture that I love. This is when they're walking across the tree branch, and it's in the moonlight. And so she has the pictures of these 4 adorable animals. So so I was very lucky to have a sister who's so talented, but who also understands so much about Japanese costuming. She dresses all my dancers when I have recitals, and she's just so talented in the arts. My daughter also helped. I just wanted to mention my daughter Melissa. She helped digitize the drawings, and she helped color the ones that look kind of watercolor. She's very good with computer software, so she was able to do that. And so yeah, and actually my sister got her artistic talent from my mom. My mom is also very artistic. She doesn't admit it, but she is.
I think she has a lot of talents that she is quietly keeping to herself. So, Miss Marian, how was it working with both of your daughters on, and your granddaughter on this book? How much joy did that bring you?
Great, because I'm not high tech at all, and they did it all on computers, and I still don't know how they did it on the computers. But the best thing I do is I like to sew kimonos. So I sew most of the kimonos for our group, but I'm not high tech at all. I just do the basic sewing.
Wow, I think if you don't know the basics, how can you take it to the next level? I mean, and how many of us don't know the basics anymore? So that's quite a talent. And so you are actually right now, you're living in California, correct, Marian?
Yes.
And
yes,
Carolyn, you are on Kauai.
Yes.
And your sister is?
My
San
sister
Jose.
lives in San Jose.
Okay.
Yeah. My mom was actually with me in Hawaii on March 12th. And I told her, why don't you just stay here? I think it's going to be safer on Kauai. And she said, no, I think I'll go back to my other house. I'll be back in a few months, because at that time, COVID seemed like it would be short, but no. So I have not seen my mom since March 12th, 2020.
Oh my goodness.
Just on FaceTime.
So are you all working on a third book? Is that in discussion right now?
Not yet.
Yeah, I think we'll see how this book goes, and if they ask us to, we'll write. We'll do another one.
So one of the things we were talking about earlier was, if you could pick one of the stories from this book, and they're all marvelous, and I think everyone should get a copy of the book, and someone just wrote in and said, can you show the front cover again? But it's good for children and adults. If you were to pick one story from here to share with world leaders at this time in our life, what story would that be? Why? And maybe you could do a little reading.
I actually, the story that came to me when you asked that was the Tsuki no Usagi, which is the story about the rabbit in the moon. It's a fable that comes from Asia. It's not originally Japanese. It came from China, but it explains how the rabbit got in the moon, and it's a story of giving up of yourself, and for the good of someone else. And in this day and age, I think that's a very important message.
I thought so too.
Yeah. So,
do you want me to read the story?
We would love for you to read the story.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a story about Moon Rabbit, or Tsuki no Usagi. A long time ago, a spirit named the Old Man of the Moon was watching the forest animals on Earth from his home on the moon. He saw a rabbit, a monkey, and a fox, all living together as good friends and keeping themselves warm around a campfire. I wonder which of these animals is the kindest, he asked himself. To find out, the Old Man of the Moon changed himself into a poor beggar and traveled down to the forest. As a beggar, he approached the group of animals and acted as though he was hungry. He asked the rabbit, the monkey, and the fox if they had any food to share. Oh, what a poor, hungry old man, the animals exclaimed. Let's go find him some food to eat. The monkey, with his long arms, started swinging from tree branch to tree branch, gathering lots of fruit. The fox, with his strong jaws, caught a fresh fish from the river. Both the monkey and the fox presented their gifts of food to the old beggar. Oh dear, what should I do? Wondered the rabbit. I don't have long arms or a strong jaw with which to catch food. The rabbit ran to find food, but with his small arms and mouth, he could only gather grass for the old man and more firewood for the fire. He returned to his friends at the fire. I am so sorry, old man. I cannot find any good food for you. I can only give you myself. Please eat me once I am roasted. Just as the rabbit started to jump into the fire to cook himself, the old man stopped him. He threw off his cloak and revealed that he was actually the Old Man of the Moon. Rabbit, you are very kind. You will be rewarded for your selflessness, said the Old Man of the Moon. Since you are the kindest and most selfless animal, I will take you home to live with me on the moon. From now on, you will pound mochi on the moon for everyone to see. The Old Man of the Moon took the rabbit in his arms and carried him up to the moon. So now, whenever you look up at the full moon, you can see the image of a rabbit pounding mochi. The end.
Thank you. And I've got to say that, once in Japan, they tell you it's a rabbit in the moon. And once you see a rabbit in the moon, it's hard to see anything else in the moon. Can you, Marian, even see a man on the moon anymore, or is it always a rabbit?
I see the rabbit.
Is this one of your personal favorite stories as well?
Oh, I have so many, but that one was a good story. It wasn't so gross. But I liked all the stories. So it was hard to choose only one, but they're all very good.
Yeah. Do you have go ahead.
So hope whoever buys this book enjoys it just as much as I did.
Indeed. And we have a couple questions here. Deb Omori said she loves that story. And Rona Del Val says she just wanted to say hello to Auntie Marian and Carolyn. She loves you. And Karen Hoffman is asking, when you were writing for the paper before the book, how did you choose your topics before you started doing the book? So Carolyn, how did you choose the stories that you covered?
So that's a good question. For the Hawaii Herald, that monthly column that I write either about whatever is happening at that moment. If it's a Japanese festival that's coming up, I always write about the festival so that the kids could learn about the festival and maybe make a craft in advance of the festival. If there is a current event, like when the Emperor and Empress visited Hawaii, I wrote about the chrysanthemum crest. And so or when there was an earthquake in Japan, I wrote about earthquakes. So, and then when I can't think of anything else, I use a story that maybe is of that season. Like in the fall, I'll use the monkey and the crab story, or in the spring, Hanasaka Jiji, which is the old man who made the trees blossom. And so, so it's usually about it's usually related to whatever month or festival it is right now. For example, the column I'm going to write for the February Hawaii Herald is going to be about the Girls' Day, which it comes up in early March.
Right around the corner. Karen also asked, have you ever examined how the morals in the Japanese stories relate to those by others, such as the Aesop fables?
I think actually the morals are somewhat similar. There's a few Japanese, the traditional values that are just like just like the things that everybody else teaches. There's a few that maybe aren't as good in the modern world. For example, if you're going to gaman and hold back and not speak up when something is bothering you, that maybe that's not the greatest thing. But most of the Japanese traditional values are so useful and so great in having a cooperative and peaceful society. I think it's important that we learn all of them.
So I guess this leads me to the next question, which is, what are your hopes for the book? Not only that, of course, it sells and all of that, but deeper, what do you hope people get from this book?
Mom, can I answer?
Sure.
Okay. So
we have the same thoughts. We have the same thoughts.
Yeah, we do talk every day. So for me, I grew up hearing these stories from my dad. And also from Japanese school. I heard a lot of these stories in Japanese school. And I want the next generation to hear these stories. I remember reading some of these stories to my own kids, and I am hoping that they will take this book and read it to their kids. Not only for the values that we're talking about, learning these lessons that the stories teach, but also just to keep the Japanese culture alive. There's sometimes I teach a kid Japanese dancing, and I say, the story Momotaro, and they're like, no, tell it to me. So I want kids, the Yonsei and the Gosei and the future generations to know these stories. It's harder and harder as there are more generations removed from Japan, but listening to these stories read by their parents, I think, is going to be very valuable in many ways.
What about you, Marian? I know you said you both think the same, but do you have any additional thoughts beyond that? What are your hopes? What are your hopes for the book?
Well, I hope the children will gather all the good deeds that these books will teach them, because there are some good things they can learn from these stories. And I hope that it will continue, that they will go on generation after generation. Oh, I can't hear you.
There. It would help if I unmuted myself. So Joanne Leslie just typed in, she said, I bought copies for 2 of my grandsons who are not from the Japanese culture. Do you think the book is good for introducing others to Japanese culture? Ladies?
Yeah, sure. I think it is. Oh, go ahead, Mom.
You go ahead.
Oh,
I think it. I think it really is.
Because if they take the book and especially look at the blue highlighted words, which are the vocabulary words, they'll learn just a little bit of Japanese language, and they'll learn some of the culture as well. And one of the things that I liked from my dad's old book, this one that I showed you, is that they had a lot of Japanese phrases. So that's why I put 2 pages of Japanese phrases in here, and I inserted those into the stories as well where it was appropriate. Just like tadaima, for when you come home. And yeah, so I think it would be very valuable to learn Japanese culture and values, but things that are useful in everyday life.
Have you had any outside interest in the book? Have you, have you had any have you thought about doing something in Japan with the book? I mean, obviously they know the stories, but maybe turning it around so that, you know, students could learn English through the their own fairy tales, their own stories. Have you thought of anything like that?
I hadn't, but that's a good idea. I think that I would have to have a person helping me write the Japanese part, you know, right? Because I'm actually Yonsei. So yeah, I would have to have someone help with the Japanese part, but that's a great idea.
Well, you have a lot of fans on the call today. Alan Oda just saying hello from Los Angeles to Mrs. Kubota and his fellow middle high school colleague. And he said his son plans to teach bilingually, Japanese and English, and he thinks the book is absolutely wonderful. And they appreciate how you're keeping culture alive for children. And Mary Odds said Auntie Mary just says, thank you for sharing. But you know, going back to the story that you told about the rabbit in the moon and world leaders, uh, that's a great story to tell and a great lesson to learn. Um, we are gently getting to the end of the talk, and I wanted to thank you. Actually, here we have another. Oh, Sharon Teraoka said, the book is very much needed for this world today. You know, so regardless of politics or anything like that, these are good stories to tell. So I'm going to come back to the two of you for some final comments, but to everybody else, just wanted to let you know how much we appreciate you joining us again for an afternoon with the author, which we will be continuing throughout this year. It's going to be the third Saturday um, of the month. Upcoming this week on January 20th at 4 p.m., our board president, Brian Moto, will be having a conversation with Dr. Chip Fletcher of the University of Hawaii, who's going to come on and talk about a very timely subject that we here in Hawaii, it's very important to us, which is climate change. So don't miss that. And next Tuesday, January 26th, General David Bramlett will be coming on to share his presentation, The Nisei Soldier in World War II, The Price of Citizenship. So both talks, very important subjects, and you can join the talks. You can register by going to our website at nvmc.org and signing up there. We would love to have you join us. And I'm going to send it back to you, Carolyn, and your mother, Marian, for some closing remarks.
Okay, thanks. My mom said that I should do it, so she's just going to nod. I just wanted to say that my parents' generation, my mom and my dad, they taught us so much about giving to others. As I mentioned before, my dad and four uncles volunteered for the 100th 442nd at MIS, and they passed to my generation a legacy of service to others. And I think that my mom and I teaching other children and adults about Japanese culture is a part of that legacy. Also, I wanted to encourage everyone to teach your children and grandchildren about many cultures, you know, through dance, martial arts, music, art, and even those cultures that are not your own. To me, of course, I'm a dance teacher, so I think this, but I think that the more cultures we all learn about, the better everyone, people of all different cultures can all understand each other. So I think it's very important that we do that.
Thank you. Well, that's a wonderful, yes. Did everybody see Marian? I don't know if they saw you give a thumbs up, Marian Kubota.
Yes.
Well, we want to thank both of you so much for being on today, for taking time out of your schedule to do this, and for writing the book. Again, we have about 10 copies signed here at the office. So if you're interested in purchasing one, you can just shoot us an email or give us a phone call. You all know how to get in touch with us. First come, first serve. And we wish all of you a very happy new year. Thank you again, Carolyn. Thank you, Marian. We wish you all the best. And to all of you, until next time, stay safe, be well, and ahui ho.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Same to you.